Hello, you're with Anne and Nick, if I can find Nick. There he is.
Hello, how are we doing?
Oh, we're doing very well. What a lovely day it's been, actually.
Yeah, beautiful. Done lots of walking, really pleasant. I've just loved it.
How much walking?
About 6 miles today.
I'm very impressed.
Great.
That's
Yeah, we sort of build our day around it really, because that's how life is at the moment. It's weird, but you've got to try and make the most of the situation. And walking is a really good benefit, and it's good for the old head as well.
It is, yeah, no. I've been outside. I've been in the garden pottering, looking after my home garden, and I picked lots of mint to put in my drink. Cheers. It's weird to say it's been a lovely day, because I know so many people are working so hard and some people are suffering, and that it seems awful to say it's been a lovely day, but given the circumstances, like you say, you have to make the best of it.
They start at crack of dawn, work long hours, and when they get home, the day is virtually over, and they've been putting their life on the line all that time. It is weird because we go for walks, and we've commented on this, it's all quiet and peaceful, and you hardly see a car and you hardly see a person. Yet somewhere else, not so far away, in a hospital, it is bedlam.
Yes, it's bedlam, and it's upsetting, and it's stress.
I know.
And, there's no way you can read it.
Isn't it? Stress for people whose families are in there, members of the family are in hospital, and they can't even be with them to see exactly how they are.
Anyway, it's nice to de-stress by reminiscing. As like I said on a tweet, I said it's delish to reminisce.
Yeah,
and we've got the most
third program now.
Yeah, we got the most wonderful person to reminisce with.
Oh yes, my goodness. Will we get a word in edgeways? This is my worry.
Well, that's why I thought we should start out talking to each other first, just for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
But shall we introduce him? I hope he's there. The wonderful, the inimitable, the inestimable, and there's every other able about him, Gyles Brandreth. Let's see if we can get Gyles online. Hello.
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 It's exciting. Can you hear me? Are you receiving me?
Yes.
Yes,
loud and clear.
I'm back in your studio. This is where I feel I belong.
Oh, absolutely, it is.
And the first time, Gyles, was July 1983.
Wow.
And we have a confession to make about that day, don't we, Anne?
Yes, we do, rather. It's awful, isn't it? But Clive Jones, who was our editor at the time, came in the morning and said, and one of our special guests today is a guy called Gyles Brandreth, and we went,
Who's that?
Who's that?
Brandreth.
Oh, he was president of the Oxford Union. He's done this, he's done that, he's done the next thing. And we went sort of, is he TVAM material, we thought? And we were actually almost reluctant, because we just thought, we didn't know you. But when you walked in the studio was set on fire, and it was just magic. But, we were half a mind to say, no, we've never heard of him.
Do you remember the first day, Gyles?
How far were you into TVM by then? How many months had you both done?
I started on the first day, for February the 1st, and this was the middle of July, and Anne came middle of June, I think, didn't you, Anne?
That's right, yes, yeah. So not long, actually.
So yeah, in terms of history, it's a very short time. But do you remember the first time you came in?
I do remember the first time I came in. I didn't know much about it. The reason I was brought in is that who had taken over as the overall boss?
Greg Dyke or not?
Greg, yes, Greg. Yeah. Yes, and I'd worked for Greg at London Weekend. He did a show on Fridays, and he had me and my friend. Who did he have?
Well, Frank Bosch used to present it, didn't he? Frank Bosch.
I thought it was
Michael Aspel. And me and Danny Baker, we were chalk and cheese, and we were sent out to be chalk and cheese together. So the idea was that he would go and visit the playing fields of Eton, and I would go and have bangers and mash in the East End. And that's
Love it.
That's how I met Greg Dyke. And he came to me and he said, we're going to do the same thing at TVAM. He said, but instead of you and Danny, it's going to be you at the posh end. And we've got rather a rough, he said, you won't believe it, a sort of sewer rat at the other end. So I said, oh, really? A sewer rat? For real? Is this a person? He said, no, it's going. Wait and see.
Wait and see.
And when did Roland Rat join? About the same time, wasn't it?
In the beginning of April. I introduced, I think, one of his first things. Yeah.
Very good. Anyway, was I wearing a funny jumper on day one?
Yes,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think so.
I
Yes.
arrived wearing the jumpers because I think I already knew, I'd done some research, and the research told me that what people remember of television, only 17% is what they hear, 83% is what they see.
Yes.
So I thought, well, I don't look as lovely as Anne, you know.
You were a good-looking youngster then. You really were.
I had
As
more
you
hair.
were.
I had more hair.
Y-
And so I thought I'll wear these novelty jumpers. And look, I've revived them. Look at the one I'm wearing today.
Oh, well,
Great British Bulldog.
I'm trying to show the bulldog spirit.
Yes.
but we did think, Gyles, that perhaps you were going to be a bit cerebral, because I mean, from reading your autobiography, your wonderful diary, which is absolutely riveting a read, but you know, you could have won Mastermind when you were 7 years old. You were so intellectual.
In theory.
Yeah.
I give the impression of being somebody who knows all the answers. It's mostly bluff, to be honest. It's just an impression. It's interesting that people give off an impression. For example, I give off the impression that I never stop talking. And it's partly true, but it's not entirely true. I have occasionally recorded a whole program and people say, oh God, you never stop talking. And then I play it back and actually note how much I said. And it's less than other people, but I give the impression. So I think I'm what is known as a strong taste.
Yeah. On that subject, you got the world record for the longest after dinner speech.
3 times. The first time I did it to raise money for a charity whose name was Action Research for the Crippled Child. You wouldn't call it that now, but it really was a very good scientific research charity.
Yes.
And I spoke for about 3.5 hours. And a friend of mine, Nicholas Parsons, came to see me do this.
Yeah.
And he thought, well, I can do better than that. And so Nicholas spoke after dinner for about 7 hours.
My goodness.
Then it was decided that we would both have a go at it. And we both did it for, I think, the National Playing Fields Association.
Yes, that's
good
right.
charity. I was, I think, then the chairman.
Yes.
Duke of Edinburgh was the president. The Queen, whose birthday falls tomorrow, was the patron. Anyway, Nicholas Parsons and I decided we would do this, go for this record together. And the real challenge was to speak non-stop for many hours. You have to do it after dinner. Had to be a real challenge, was you'd have to go through the night. And Nicholas said, I'm going to have a bit of a problem there because I like to get up, in the middle of the night and just go and relieve myself. I said, well, it's a problem for me too. Because I said, I'm younger than you, but I've got 3 small children now. And one of the side effects of having children, well, Anne, you can vouch for this, is you do need to go to the loo a bit, don't you?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, we were sent to somewhere called John Bell and Croydon, which were medical suppliers off Wigmore Street.
Oh, no.
And they equipped us each with an appliance, apparently worn by elderly field marshals on parade grounds when taking the salute in cold weather.
I love it.
It was embarrassment. We each were strapped up with one of these things. We got up to speak and wearing these contraptions. And it was we were going to speak for 10, 11 hours. And at about 2 in the morning, we were in adjacent rooms, each of us speaking on the same night in the same hotel, but in separate rooms. Each of us sponsored. The audience was sponsored. We were going to raise thousands of pounds. And at about 2 in the morning, I thought, no, I'm ready now. I've got to let go. I'm desperate for a pee. I must let go. So I thought, well, we hadn't had a dry run, if you'll forgive the expression. I thought, what are we going to do? I thought, I'll tell a joke, one of Nick's groaners. That's when he heard it first time around. I'll tell a joke, and on the laugh, I'll let go. But unfortunately, because I was so nervous, I mistimed the joke. There was no laugh, and I let go and glanced down apprehensively, and suddenly I realized that the contraption had slipped its moorings.
Oh, no.
And yes, and I saw slithering out of my trouser leg this hideous pink tubing, and it began creeping across the stage, at which point from the adjacent room, I heard a cry of despair from Nicholas Parsons. His contraption had slipped its mooring at exactly the same point. Anyway, as a result of this, 2 interesting things to tell you. After 11 hours, they decided to call a halt to it because we'd both spoken for 11 hours. It was declared a tie. Instead of us both then rushing off to the loo, we both found that we'd held it in so much that we couldn't then perform. And both of us found we were not able to pee for about 3 days.
You're joking.
It did us almost a permanent injury.
It's amazing.
Nicholas always used to say he was convinced it would shorten his life.
Yes, well, it did.
This is in about 1983. It was about the year we first met. It was, I think it was 1983 that we did it. So there we are. And of course,
interesting there, Gyles. You mentioned the fact that you with the National Playing Fields Association. I remember that very well. And that that's probably where you first met Prince Philip, but you've had an enduring relationship with him.
The reason you remember,
it's gone on for a long time.
The reason you, Anne Diamond, remember it well is you did both the charity and me a big favor, because you came along to a fundraising event for the Playing Fields Association dressed as Queen Victoria.
I did.
Do you remember that?
Pictures in the book.
Yeah, because
exhibition. Yes,
because
go on.
You wanted a big parade of historic characters, and I wanted to help you take part. And we thought, I was 9 months pregnant at the time, and I thought, what the heck could I possibly dress up as? And you came up with this brilliant idea of an old Queen Victoria, as she was when she was short and squat and just in a big black Victorian dress with a little white cap on. And it worked. It worked extremely well. Yes, I remember that very well.
And Gyles, you see Prince Philip's come out with a big statement today about the current situation.
What a great man he is. I mean, I tell you, people like him, and indeed Nicholas Parsons, these old gentlemen who live into their 90s, well, like Captain Tom now, these remarkable old men who actually spend all their lives thinking about other people and not themselves. Yeah. One of the reasons I think they live happily into a great age, they're still interested in the world around them. They are my role models. And Prince Philip has long been a hero of mine. When I was an MP, if I couldn't think what answer to give, I gave the answer I thought Prince Philip would give, which may explain the swing against me when I lost the seat. Because he wasn't always politically correct. But
no.
Yes, you're right. The Duke of Edinburgh, who has been retired now for 3 years, has issued, I think, the first statement since his retirement. And it's pretty short and to the point. He is a practical, pragmatic man. He gets to the point. And he's very interested in, always has been, in science, engineering, things that actually are at the forefront that can make a difference. So he is saluting the scientists who are looking for a virus. And then the other thing he's very keen on is are the real people. So he is simply saying, and also let's actually thank the people in the front line who are keeping the whole thing going, such as the postman and the bin men. Yes. I think it's wonderful to have, the first person who's come out and said, let's hear it for the bin men is...
Exactly. And isn't that interesting? Look, there's a lovely picture of you a while ago, probably.
Probably. You're very
sweet. A bit pointed.
A while ago. Thank you, Anne. I'd say about 40 years ago, but yes.
All right. But you have had this lasting friendship, haven't you? You obviously get on.
Well, I have to say he's tolerated me. The thing to remember with royalty, and both of you have met a lot of royals over the years, is something that James Callaghan, do you remember him? He was Prime Minister. And I met him once at a royal garden party. We were in the inner circle, in the inner tent where the Queen is. And I said, oh, it's exciting being here and you're Prime Minister now. And I said, you're friends with the King and with the Queen and Prince Philip. He said, oh, no. He said, Gyles, you must remember something. Royalty, they offer you friendliness, not friendship.
Oh, that's interesting.
Remember
that's an interesting line.
Interesting line. And I've always been conscious of that. I have to say, I've been very lucky to meet members of the royal family. And I wrote a book about the Queen and Prince Philip and was given special access to walk with them, talk with them when they went about their official duties. And I've always felt, yes, they're lovely and friendly, but actually, let's not overstep the mark. I always felt with the Duke of Edinburgh that he sort of treated me as though I were kind of extra equerry who had turned up. And since I was there, I'd be sort of tolerated. Because though sometimes he's very jolly, and sometimes he can be quite frightening, quite alarming. You don't get on the wrong side of him. And also, the reason I knew him was because I was chairman of his pet charity. The Playing Fields was the first national charity he took on when he became Duke of Edinburgh in 1948. And I, therefore, spoke often with him about it. And I remember that almost the last time I did this, not that many years ago, at Buckingham Palace, I was making this fundraising speech, and he was standing next to me. And I was halfway through a story when he suddenly began barracking me, going, we've heard this before. Boring. Brandreth, this is boring. These people, we've heard all your stories. They're not true anyway. Oh, God. And he went on. And I thought, how am I going to finish this? I struggled on. The audience thought it was hilarious.
Yes, well, exactly.
Gyles, we take breakfast television for granted now. It's there and it's an institution. But obviously, when you joined us in '83, it wasn't. It was very new, and TVM had a really rough old time. It's starting to emerge and become, as you know, hugely successful. What did you think in those days about the atmosphere created at TVM, the whole feel of it?
I have to tell you, it was one of the 2 or 3 happiest times of my life.
Oh.
One of the reasons is that I love being in things that are at the beginning. There's a radio station called LBC, which is now a national radio station. I was broadcasting there on its very first day when people didn't know that people would listen to commercial radio. I was in there to do puzzles before and I gave the puzzle before the commercial break and then gave the answer afterwards because they were nervous that people wouldn't stay tuned to the radio station. And so when I saw TVAM coming along and Greg Dyke came and said, we got this TV station, and he said, I won't use the words, his language was fruity at the best of times. He said, no one's watching. No one's watching. Charles, no one's watching. But we're going to change all that, and you're going to be a part of it, okay? We got you and a rodent going on, okay? I thought this is going to be fun. This is the beginning of a new adventure. And then when I arrived, you were inventing something that had never existed before. And the reasons your predecessors, and they were stars, there was David Frost, who became a mentor to all 3 of us.
Oh, yes.
And wouldn't you say? And was a very good and lovely man.
Yeah,
but he and the rest of them, they were approaching it in a way that was quite different, that was American. And you 2 invented something that we now take for granted. The world now does it. Everyone does it. But you 2 were the first people to do it. That we sat down, we felt easy on a sofa. Yes. And every interview you ever conducted was a success, except for one. You may not remember this. Anne's only unsuccessful interview, it was not her fault. Sometimes on Sundays, David had to be away. I don't know why he went away on a Sunday. I don't like to think where he was or what he was doing, but he didn't do it every Sunday. And Anne was brought in to stand in for him, to sit in for him on Sunday. Yeah. And when you were sitting in for David, I was your sidekick, just there to say something if required. Okay? And one night, it was the night that Rex Harrison died. Okay, huge star. The man was in My Fair Lady. Yeah. And I knew something about Rex Harrison, so I said, I'll talk about him. But whoever was producing that day said, we can't have you, you're the sidekick, we must have somebody. So they got in Edward Fox. Yeah. Edward Fox, father of Lawrence Fox. Yeah. No, uncle of Lawrence Fox, father of Freddie Fox. Yeah, but anyway, the long and the short of it is that Anne said to Edward Fox, the great Sir Rex Harrison has died. What was special about him, Mr. Fox? You worked with him, you knew him. Edward Fox just sat there. Anne then said, well, what did he have? After a long pause, Edward Fox said, genius. So Anne then said, well, how did that show itself? Long pause. Then eventually he said, either the sun shines or it doesn't. Then Anne said, well, what are you doing now, Mr. Fox? More silence. And eventually he said, talking to you, unfortunately.
Yes.
Oh my God.
One of those actors.
It was one of those interviews.
Yes.
And I thought, well, if Anne can get nowhere, I can't get anywhere. And I think you and I, Anne, ended up chatting to ourselves.
Yes. You do wonder, I mean, there have been several of those throughout our time, all 3 of us. You do wonder why you shouldn't actually have had the guts to just lean forward to them and say, why did you bloody bother to come in?
But instead it wasn't. But what I loved about TVAM, I mean, I remember the day Willy Brandt, former Chancellor of West Germany,
remember that,
sat on the sofa with you 2, with me, and Roland Rat popped up over the back. I can't believe it. This is the Chancellor of West Germany, one of the most significant people in the post-war world, and he's on a sofa with me and Roland Rat. I don't think he knew what was happening to him, but he took it with grace.
But that was the charm of it. It was naive, wasn't it? But it was
the mix.
But also we were so privileged to meet all the people we met. The heroes and heroines of our childhood came along.
Absolutely.
It was there that I met Diana Dawes, who in the 1940s and 1950s was my dad's pin-up. And then I was going home and saying to my dad, I had breakfast with Diana Dawes. Completely.
Yeah.
Oh,
look at the picture. Can you
there
see
you
that?
are.
Yeah.
There's Diana. Who's
today? Unfortunately, there isn't a photograph with you on it as well, but you were there. And Diana, that was Robert Wagner there as well.
Aren't I right that Diana became a regular with us?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yes. She, for a long time. First of all, she came on to lose weight because she wanted to lose weight, and we were going to do a thing about sort of home economics and how to eat the right things, and nutritionists was involved. And each week I used to weigh her and see if her weight had gone down because she was on this excellent diet. And the weight kept dropping off until after 13 weeks, she'd lost something like 28 pounds. And we had a lump of lard on the table in the kitchen to illustrate how much she'd lost. But you can tell us more about that, Giles.
I can tell you more about it. I do remember it because you had the scales just in front of that table.
Yes, old-fashioned scales.
And I can remember you standing by her watching this. Well, as you recall, I had a lot of jumpers. And Greg encouraged me in the jumpers. And then when Bruce Gingell, the great Australian, came along, the reason I survived is I wore colourful jumpers. Yes. He said, the only reason we're keeping you is because it's the colourful knitwear, you know? Colour. And I wore lots of yellow because he loved yellow. Do you remember that? He adored yellow.
To say you've got to have sunshine colours in the morning.
Sunshine colours. But he did say, because we kept doing rehearsals for when the Queen Mother died.
Yes.
Do you remember this?
Yes, I had to have a little black dress hanging in the wardrobe just in case. Always.
And I had
and
I had a black jumper. And I kept this black jumper in a cupboard with all the jumpers. And this was a cupboard that was like I think it was a costume changing room. And there was basically a makeup room. And I don't think there was a proper dressing room, was there?
No, it would have been, there was makeup and wardrobe. You would have got changed in wardrobe.
Anne and I shared the dressing room.
Yeah. So I was getting changed in wardrobe, where I found Diana Dawes. And I must tell you this, I found her putting weights into her clothes. And she swore me to secrecy. I think she wouldn't mind now, because she was laughing at the same time.
Yeah.
Diana Dawes made herself heavier at the
when it started.
Experiment. So that as the weeks went by, she could gradually remove more and more of these weights and get lighter and lighter without losing weight.
Yeah.
Do you know, I'd always heard that, but never quite believed it. And it was true. Weights. Oh,
did you ever go to her home?
Yes, many times.
That swimming pool that she had, she lived an old-fashioned star's life, didn't she?
Yeah, it was like Hollywood.
And she had her husband, Alan Lake, who I think was a bit of a lad, or had been. He rather frightened me. I think he played gangsters and gave the impression that maybe he knew a few.
Oh, I think
remember, whenever I was there, did he know a few? I don't know.
Oh, yes.
He was always swimming up and down that swimming pool while we sat at the side with her sipping the champagne.
Yeah, Giles, at her funeral, one of the Crays was sitting right behind us.
Ooh.
Crying like a baby.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I do remember Barbara Windsor once telling me, Barbara Windsor and I, wow, lovely Babs. We were driving from East Anglia. We'd done a program. Oh, there's the swimming pool. There's the swimming pool.
Gosh.
My God. Your library contains everything.
And that was sort of part of the living room, really. The living room.
It was. We were sitting at this end, as it were, or the side.
At this end, there was cream-coloured carpet and cream-coloured sofas, right up to the edge of the pool. I've never seen anything like it.
You would have
she had loads of CCTV screens in the kitchen, which I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
You know,
I wouldn't have had the nerve to take a photograph of the sitting room, but well done, you two, taking.
I don't know who took it.
Amazing.
I wouldn't dare.
Anyway, just to finish my Barbara Windsor story, we were traveling through the East End of London, and I mentioned we passed the famous pub where the Crays used to do their stuff. And I said, well, they were, they're murderers and all that. She said, oh, they only ever killed their own. They never killed their own. Well, that may be true.
That's right. Giles, do you remember?
It is a bit reassuring. I think she meant, I'd have been all right.
Yeah. Giles, do you remember the day that Ringo Starr came in?
Oh, I do. It was when he had just done The Voice. It's all coming back to me now. He'd just done the voice of Thomas the Tank Engine. Ringo Starr.
Yeah, and he spent half the morning, I was going to say, in the kitchen with Rusty Lee on the red wine.
Oh, Well, that's strange. You know, he's now teetotal.
Is he?
He's now teetotal, and he can. What is amazing is being teetotal. He can now get into that costume he wore on the cover of the Lonely Hearts Club Band. He can still fit into that. That's the advantage of not having a drink. Oh, I saw Rusty only last October. She's in great form.
Yes, she is. She's still on great form. All of us are. We've done awfully well, most of us. I want to ask you what you think, because you've probably been on it, haven't you, several times, of any of the new breakfast television programs. Have they got it? Have they got it?
No. Back TVAM, bring back the original cast. I honestly, I think I suggested to someone boldly at one of these, it was either ITV or the BBC. I said, in the summer, why don't you give us all a break and turn the clock back for a month? Reinvent TVM just for a month. I said, I'll come on, Anne and Nick will come on, Rusty will be in the kitchen, Ulrika can do the weather. Just don't apologize for it. Don't put it in inverted commas. Let us do the show in the way we used to do the show, without a whole raft of researchers, actually sitting down, knowing about the people, having done our own homework. You know, when I used to do the video reviews and the readers' letters and all that, I just did it on my own. You just went in, you did the show, you took an intro, and it happened. You could do it. I mean, I think we had 4 camera people at most. It was a tiny team. And of course, I think, to be honest, I think it would still work.
And some great members of the team, such as Lizzie doing the fitness stuff, Wincy, bless her heart, Gordon Honeycomb, Jimmy Greaves, Paul Mancini, Chris Tarrant. It was a great lineup, wasn't it? It
was a great lineup. What was lucky for us was people like Gordon Honeycomb there, giving a touch of seniority to the proceedings.
Gravitas.
That's what he was all about. All right, big question to both of you, maybe. Are Piers and Susanna the new us? Have they got it right?
Oh, no, they're a different breed, completely different animal.
It's a totally different phenomenon. To be honest, it works in its own way, because Piers is, as it were, what he is, and that's what you either love that, buy into it, or else. And it's good of the kind it is. It isn't what you are. There is nothing quite. They do a little bit of what you are in This Morning, and the BBC Breakfast. I love it. It works. It's a different, but it's a different thing.
Very different.
You invented, with, it must be said, Greg and Bruce, infotainment, and we dealt with the serious. We dealt with the serious things seriously. Do you remember who was the great American politician who came? We had some huge American politicians who came, and I remember sitting down with them and thinking, my goodness, this is. We can do this as well. We can make these people accessible.
And they used to say that. We used to get big Hollywood stars, but also, as you said, big American politicians and British politicians who would come on expecting one thing and actually find that they enjoyed it and they loved the informality of it, but it was still a serious interview and it still did serious stuff.
Especially at the end of the programme, we'd have all the people who'd been on the programme earlier, they're all back on the sofa. So you'd have sort of Arthur Scargill, Elton John, the Pope, incredible lineup and a classic mix.
Jesse Jackson, he used to come on a lot. He was
Jesse Jackson. I remember having breakfast with him with about 6 security men standing around the breakfast table.
I think we've interviewed about 7 prime ministers, Anne and I, over the years, and it's quite something to have done that, past and present. I go back to Harold Wilson. Actually, I did an interview with him one day.
He was a nice man. I liked him. A friend of his son, very nice man called Robin Wilson. I tell you what I loved about TVM was the canteen.
Yes. The breakfast after you come off air.
After you come off air, going into that canteen, lining up. And I remember sitting with you two at breakfast one day with Anthony Hopkins. Before I think he became an Oscar-winning film star. And we sat there and he did impressions. So John Gielgud, Sir Laurence Olivier, Charlton Heston, he did all these impressions, but just the 3 of us sitting having breakfast. Beyond belief.
My favourite breakfast was probably with Eric Morecambe. I don't know if you today, but sitting with him at breakfast was pretty special. Gosh.
But that was what was so special about breakfast, was that by the end of the programme you were starving, and so were the guests, because they'd had to get up early too. So when you said, how about a complete slap up breakfast, they
Full
would
English.
kick you, and the whole thing would go on until lunchtime. It was marvelous.
Do you remember our longest ever screen kiss?
Oh, yes. Oh, my goodness, yes.
The first time for Valentine's Day, because I had a lovely jumper with a big heart on it, for Valentine's Day, one year, 83, 84, one of the early years, we decided that we would attempt, because I'd read in the Guinness Book of Records, the longest screen kiss was held by a man called Regis Toomey, who on screen kissed Jane Wyman, the first wife of Ronald Reagan.
Yes.
For about 2 minutes. So we thought we can manage 2 minutes. And you gamely volunteered.
I don't remember volunteering, but okay.
Anyway, it was agreed.
I remember it.
It was agreed that we would kiss. And because we were infotainment, news came first. Unfortunately, during our osculatory marathon, Anne, we had to go live to Moscow for coverage of President Brezhnev's funeral.
Oh, no.
So literally, we had to stop
During the
kissing.
kiss?
Yes, during the kiss, so we could go live. There was I think we had, believe it or not, a Moscow correspondent. I find this hard to believe. I think there was somebody in Moscow. And so next time round, so we had to abandon our record break. And then a year later, I did it with Cheryl Baker of Bucks Fizz.
Yes.
And that was quite fun.
There's a lovely clip of that on YouTube, actually. I've seen it.
I have to say, the range of things that you've been involved with over your life, Gyles, is amazing. So really cerebral, intellectual stuff at one end. Yet you're sort of a bit of an expert on panto. You've written books on pornography, I think, in your time, haven't you?
Well, I've not written... I haven't written a book on pornography, but
you starred in it, sorry.
I did go with Lord Longford. Do you remember Lord Longford? You must have had him.
Yes.
The Earl of Longford, Frank Pakenham, the Earl of Longford, a lovely man who would now, I think, be more respected than he was in his day, because he conducted a campaign against pornography, saying that actually it was demeaning women, it was turning relationships into something that was not to do with affection, treating people as sort of objectifying people, and people mocked him for lack of freedom of speech. And anyway, he did this inquiry on pornography, and I went over to Copenhagen with him to investigate pornography. And it was a strange committee. There was me, an archbishop, a bishop, a rabbi, and Cliff Richard. Yes.
What a gig.
Seriously, what a gig. Oh, yes. I've still got the raincoat I bought at the time. But it's been a good life.
Oh, gosh, has it?
So when is the joy of the world we now live in, of course, is that because of podcasting, because of YouTube, we don't need necessarily to pitch and brief and hassle people. We can make our own programs. But I would love to see you two doing Anne and Nick again. After TVAM, how many years did you do with ITV?
We did, I went off and did ITV Sport and was lucky enough to have a Sport special on Wednesday. I hosted the World Cup and the Olympics and stuff. And then we got together again in 1992, Good Morning with Anne and Nick, for the BBC this was. Yeah. And we did 600 of those.
Wonderful.
15 million a week watching. It was a great, great time. But the powers that be decided they wanted something different and they changed it. Nothing to do with ratings. It went well. It's
funny. Something new always excites people. I'll make a confession to you. You may know this or you may not know this. You remember that Roland Ratt left TVAM.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was responsible for that.
Well,
I'm afraid I was responsible for that. I had a friend who was an agent. And my agent friend said to me, and I became a friend of David Claridge, the man behind Roland Ratt. And David used to come round to our kitchen and sit there telling me that the soul of the rat was in the palm of his hand. That's where the soul of the rat is. And I love David. And he said, they don't appreciate me. There's no money. And I said, well, I could perhaps help you. Anyway, through my agent friend, we went to the BBC. And the BBC offered Roland Ratt a huge contract, and indeed gave me quite a sweetener for making this happen. Yeah. So I'm giving you here, several £1,000s, which was a lot of money in those days.
Yeah.
But in fairness to David, he was already unhappy. He was going to leave anyway, and I just facilitated it. But what this illustrates is how people always want something new. So the BBC grabbed him without having thought through what they wanted to do with him. Let's just have him.
Yes.
And then they just did something, and then it didn't quite work, and then they forgot it.
Yes, it's like companies do that.
And
with
it's heartbreaking. And so for me, Anne and Nick was something that always worked. It worked at TVAM, it worked at Anne and Nick when you did it for the BBC. And for me, it still works. But they've always got to reinvent the wheel. That's a tragedy. But your day will come again. We have to keep reinventing ourselves. That's why I've been so lucky to discover the One Show. I mean, in a way, the closest to TVAM that I've got since TVAM has been the One Show.
Yes.
And in a way, it is similar. It's like a family.
Gosh, that's interesting you say, Gyles, because when we were at TVAM, went to someone somewhere with an idea that we should recreate TVAM in the evenings, because we realized you couldn't do breakfast forever because it was really draining. And we thought an evening program which would be similar to TVAM, same sort of guests, floating in, floating out, going live to the House of Commons at that time. The current affairs, more current affairs than the One Show. When the One Show came along, I immediately thought, gosh, this is the idea we had all those years ago, didn't you, Anne?
Absolutely.
Well, I've had a very happy 13 years there, and it is a lovely family atmosphere. And Alex and Matt, when he was there, were in a sense, they were like you. And you pop in, you sit down on the sofa, people do feel at ease, and the little film, it's a format that works. But, well, I'm going to pitch now for a new chat show with you two. I don't know what channel we'll go to, but I'm going to call it Old Gold. And it's going to be you and me, you two and me popping in my jumpers. We'll have some of the old gang back. We can bring back Rusty. We can bring back all our old friends. And we will introduce, we'll have young people on it. I mean, I'm doing this Saturday, I'm on Celebrity Pointless with a bag of chips. Whenever I do Celebrity Pointless, I choose somebody young to do it with, because they know the answers to the pop questions, and I know the answers to the history. So that's how I've managed to do reasonably well. Anyway, so we bring on young people like Bag of Chips, Scarlett Moffat, all my young friends, and we'd also bring on the vintage characters like Barry Cryer. And so we would be the old gold, putting it all together. A chat show like TVAM.
What's the word old? I'm not sure about the word old. I mean, I know I am old, but I don't like the word terribly much.
Oh, fine. Okay. You'll be the gold, and Nick and I can be old.
The old.
But you're not. Actually, in fairness, you are not as old as Nick and I. Nick and I have a similar vintage.
Yeah, we are indeed.
But you are basically like a daughter to us. You always have been. And the nice thing about Nick is that he's never behaved in an unwholesome way. That was the other nice thing, actually, about TVAM, is that it was quite on the whole, wink, wink, it was quite a wholesome place.
Although I am afraid I was taken to task for being Britain's most famous unmarried mother. They didn't like that terribly at the time.
Oh, yes, those were the days.
Oh, yeah, no, it wasn't quite as whole,some as necessarily we tried to make it look like, but there you go. Never is it?
But married mothers are the exception.
Well, exactly. I was the first. I think I was the first to sit on a daily program with a growing bump and not sort of retire quietly, because in those days, you know, women on television, they retired gracefully for a few months if they were pregnant. And I didn't, and it outraged a few, I can tell you. But what I want to say is you should definitely come on again to here with Bag of Chips one day, because I love that. Good. But also Roland has sent a message saying he really wanted to come on and meet you today.
Good.
But he's doing something in the desert with his son or something, because he lives out in Los Angeles now. Of course, he's Roland Rat.
Yeah.
Gyles, do you remember when I left TVAM to go back into sport with ITV? You did a This Is Your Life on me, a spoof, This Is Your Life. I'll never forget, one of your lines was, the face that launched 1,000 quips.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Genius.
Genius. I love your quips now. Your old, never mind the old gold, your old groaners have been a joy.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolute joy. So how are you two, just before we sign off, how are you two managing on with lockdown and all that?
Well, this has been a very important part of lockdown for us, planning it, talking about it, doing it, organising it, and chatting to people like yourself. We had Chris Tarrant on the other day, which was wonderful. So it's been an absolute joy. And also I'm contributing quite a bit to my usual programme, BBC Midlands Today. And we're I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, walking is a massive part of it. Vicky and I go long walks and things like that in the sunshine, as it has been really nice.
What about you, Gyles? How are you coping?
I'm coping well. This is my one show studio. Do you see the one show?
Yeah.
There? That's my I'll be on the one show, for example, tomorrow night, and I'm doing a series with Sheila Hancock, and we're able to do the voiceover remotely. I was going to be doing a tour with a show with Judi Dench, and then touring the country with my own one-man show. That's been postponed. So I'm writing a book. My wife said to me, Gyles, do you think the world needs another book by you?
I know. How many? I'm enjoying this one, the poetry one. It's fab. I mean, I love it. How many have you written now?
Too many. We know that. But this one, the one you're holding, Anne, is different. It's called Dancing by the Light of the Moon, and it's a collection of poetry to learn by heart. And if people want to catch up, if your listeners and viewers want to catch up on what I'm doing, find me on Twitter at GylesB1 or on Instagram at Gyles Brandreth. And or catch up on my website, gylesbrandreth.net, or indeed on YouTube. And you'll find me every day wearing another jumper from the TVAM days and performing one of the poems from that book. Because I'm learning poetry by heart to keep the brain working.
Oh, that's amazing.
Gyles, it's been lovely to talk to you again. It really has.
Great talking to you. Let's do it again soon.
Yeah, let's.
And I'm looking forward to our wonderful show when we're back on network television. 15 million. We were the people who actually managed to give the broadcasters an audience of 15 million. None of them is doing that.
Yeah. Great to talk to you. Thank you.
Great talking to you. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye. Love to the family. Bye. Oh. Wow.
What memories. I know, really. Oh. Lovely days, weren't they?
Because you and I think we remember a lot. But he remembers a lot too, and it adds in even more.
You see, I knew, and you knew the story about Dana Dawes and the weights, but you always thought, is that really true? And now he's just proved it was true.
I know. I sort of didn't believe it. I thought that's... But my goodness, he actually caught her doing it. That's amazing.
What memories. And Pat Phoenix, another. Do you remember Pat Phoenix as a regular on the programme?
That was true about Roland Rat as well. Roland wanted to come on today, but there was some reason logistically he just couldn't make it, but I think he's going to make it next week.
Oh, that'd be good. Great stuff. And it'll probably be this time of day to suit him, Los Angeles time wise and all that.
Yes, because of course it's...
Do we leave it there then, girl?
We will. Thank you to everyone, by the way. Apparently an awful lot of people are writing in with comments and things.
Oh, are they?
We will address those. We will address them. We haven't figured out a way yet. We're learning an awful lot of tech, aren't we, at the moment, Nick?
Oh, technical. Cool, blimey. Yeah, great to see you. Speak soon, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. It's lovely to see you, and it's lovely to see you looking so well.
Oh, thank you, and you, and thanks to everyone who's been.
Yeah, keep safe, hon.
And you. Bye-bye.
Bye.